The late afternoon sun settled gently over the quiet neighborhood in Daegu, casting long, warm beams across the tiled rooftops and narrow streets. The hum of daily life drifted softly, children returning from school, a bicycle rolling past, and the sound of someone watering their small garden. In the midst of this tranquil scene stood a modest two-story home with white walls aged by time. It was here that the father of Song Joong-ki lived, far from the noise of Seoul, far from the cameras that had followed his son for years. Inside the living room, the air carried the earthy scent of roasted barley tea. Song Joong-ki's father placed 2 warm cups on the low wooden table and settled into his usual seat near the window. He had the calmness of a man who had seen many seasons pass, the kind of calm that no spotlight could disturb. His hands were weathered yet steady, and when he smiled, the lines around his eyes deepened with a certain warmth that only comes from a life of sincerity. He admitted softly that he hadn't expected his recent comments about Joong-ki to become such a topic of attention. "I never meant for my words to travel far," he said with a small chuckle, eyes glancing toward the garden outside. "I only spoke like any father would, after watching his son go through many years of ups and downs." He lifted his cup, inhaling the steam as if drawing courage from its warmth. When he spoke about Song Joong-ki's life today, and his voice changed, gentler, steadier, filled with something both proud and relieved. "My son lives differently now," he began. "It's a different Song Joong-ki. Calmer, warmer, more whole." He explained that the man the world saw on screen was only one part of him. The real Joong-ki, the son who called home when filming ended late, who visited whenever he could, who listened more than he spoke, was someone the public rarely saw. He described how, in recent years, Joong-ki had embraced a kind of peace that only comes after walking through storms. He wasn't the boy chasing dreams anymore, nor the rising star overwhelmed by sudden fame. He was a grown man who valued ordinary moments, enjoying breakfast with loved ones, phoning family during quiet evenings, taking walks without the weight of a spotlight behind him. "These days," his father said softly, "he laughs more easily. It is a simple happiness, but a real one." The conversation drifted naturally between memories and observations, as if each word was another piece in a puzzle of growth and maturity. There was no attempt to dramatize the past or embellish the present. It was simply a father reflecting on his son with the honesty unique to parents who have witnessed the entirety of their children's journey. But as the tea cooled and the room filled with the slow quiet of the afternoon, there came a gentle shift in the atmosphere. The topic that had lingered silently finally surfaced. Every time Song Joong-ki appeared in the news, one name inevitably followed him: Song Hye-kyo. The father's gaze lowered for a moment, not in discomfort, but in contemplation. He folded his hands neatly on his lap before speaking, the way elders often do when choosing their words with care. "Hye-kyo," he murmured, voice warm yet restrained. "She was once an important part of Joong-ki's life." There was no bitterness in his tone, no regret, only a quiet acceptance of the truth that some people leave footprints too deep to erase. He acknowledged that the public still remembers the time when Song Joong-ki and Song Hye-kyo stood together as a couple admired across Asia. That their wedding had been a moment that seemed to pause the entire nation. That their separation had been a sorrow many felt personally, not just as observers but as people who believed in the love story they represented. But the father did not speak of that period with sadness. Instead, he regarded it with a sense of respect and emotional distance, the way one might reflect on an old photograph kept in a drawer. "Some memories don't fade," he said gently. "Not because they are painful, but because they touched many hearts. Not just the two of them." He leaned back slightly, eyes drifting to the window where sunlight filtered through the leaves of an old persimmon tree. The branches swayed slowly, and for a moment, he looked lost in his thoughts. He recalled how the world watched them, how their smiles once seemed to brighten even the grayest of days in Korea. And yet, the world also watched them go separate ways. It was a chapter that closed with dignity but remained alive in the collective memory of a nation that cherished them. He spoke about the impact that time had on Song Joong-ki, not in dramatic terms, but in ways that revealed quiet transformation. Break had softened him, taught him patience, deepened his empathy, and made him more considerate of others. "Pain also teaches a man how to be gentle," his father said. Joong-ki became wiser because of everything he lived through. What struck the reporter most was not what he said. He said it, with warmth, with respect. never once speaking negatively about Song Hye-kyo. Emphasized that Joong-ki had always held on to a sense of gratitude toward the past. Even if he had moved forward and rebuilt his life, there was no resentment, no bitterness, only an understanding that life does not always unfold in the ways people hope, but that every chapter has value. In the soft melody of the father's words, the living room seemed to glow with an aura of healing, an atmosphere that only a Korean home, filled with decades of memories and family values, carry. Outside, the sky shifted from afternoon gold to the gentle hues of early evening. Light spilled across the wooden floorboards, stretching toward the feet of a man who had witnessed both the highest joys and the deepest sorrows of his son's journey. The father's gaze followed the light, as though tracing the path of time itself. Out a quiet breath, one that held both acceptance and hope. Life moves forward, he said in a voice as soft as the falling dusk. But memories stay where they belong. And that's enough. The room fell into peaceful silence, broken only by the distant sound of wind brushing against a persimmon tree outside. In that moment, everything felt suspended, past, present, and future held delicately together. The entire story of Song Joong-ki and Song Hye-kyo rested gently in the hands of time. The news spread through Korea like a soft ripple across still water, quiet at first, then steadily widening as more people began to take notice. Lines appeared on portals. Comments filled the forums. Social media lit up with conversations. Not dramatic ones. Not scandalous ones. Kind of warm, reflective discussions that often appear when a story touches something human in the collective heart. People were surprised, not because Song Joong-ki's father had spoken, but because of how he had spoken, calmly, kindly. Delicate sincerity unique to an older Korean parent who has watched life unfold in waves of joy and disappointment. There was nothing sharp in his tone, nothing to ignite conflict, only truth wrapped in gentleness. In Seoul, far from his father's quiet Daegu home, Song Joong-ki was in the middle of filming when the articles began to multiply. During a short break, the manager handed him a smartphone, saying carefully, "Hyung, you might want to see this." Joong-ki wiped the sweat from his neck with a towel and scanned the headlines. His father's words were printed everywhere. He read the sentences slowly. The ones about his present happiness, his new warmth, growth as a man. And then he read the lines about Song Hye-kyo, her name spoken with respect, their past acknowledged gently, memories described as something that once touched an entire nation. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Instead, he simply exhaled a soft breath that carried something like gratitude, and something like nostalgia. Not longing, just a quiet understanding that comes from having lived through a chapter that shaped him deeply. The manager watched him carefully. "Are you okay?" He nodded. "My father means no harm. He just speaks from his heart." He tapped the screen lightly, as if brushing the words with the tip of his finger. "Glad," he spoke kindly of her. This was the part of Song Joong-ki that the public rarely saw, his capacity for gentleness. Even when faced with difficult memories, he did not run from the past. He did not resent it. But it with a level of maturity that made the people around him pause in quiet admiration. Meanwhile, in another corner of Seoul, Hye-kyo's name began trending again. Her fans expressed both concern and affection, defending her privacy while also acknowledging the bittersweet beauty of the father's words. Korean netizens, known for their emotional sensitivity, acted with warmth. She was once part of his family. Of course his father remembers her. Some relationships stay beautiful even when they end. It's healing to hear a story told without bitterness. Entertainment reporters released thoughtful analyses, reflecting on how rare it was to hear public comments so filled with dignity, rather than stirring drama. The father's interview had unexpectedly brought a sense of closure, as though an old, faintly aching wound had finally been wrapped in soft cloth. A few days later, the reporter returned to Daegu to follow up on the overwhelming reaction. This time, Song Joong-ki's father greeted them with a slightly embarrassed laugh. He hadn't expected his words to resonate so widely, and yet, he did not retract anything. "I spoke because I loved my son," he said quietly. "And I mentioned Hye-kyo because she is part of our history. A history we respect." Shifted gently toward a framed photograph on a shelf, not of the past couple, but of his family, taken many years ago. Everyone walks their own path. Both Joong-ki and Hye-kyo deserve peace and happiness in their own way. His tone held no trace of melancholy. It was simply the voice of someone who had lived long enough to understand that life never stays in one shape. Love changes. People grow. Stories evolve. Yet the memories remain kind if we choose to hold them that way. As evening settled over Daegu, the father stepped outside to close the wooden gate. The sky blushed into shades of apricot and lavender, fading behind the rooftops. Wind carried the soft rustling of the persimmon leaves. Same tree that had watched over his home for decades. He paused, looking up at the sky with the quiet expression of a man who had made peace with time. Far away, in a different part of the world where he was filming, Joong-ki finished his last scene of the day. Walked out of the bright studio lights into the open air. The sky above him a deep blue scattered with early stars. He tilted his head upward, letting the night breeze brush across his face. A fleeting moment. He thought of the journey life had carried him through, the years of love, loss, discovery, and renewal. Somewhere in Seoul, Hye-kyo stood before her vanity, removing her makeup after a long day. Reflection looked calm, wise, stronger than before. Didn't check the news again, not because she didn't care. Because she had already understood everything from the tone of his father's words. The past required no defense. It no revisiting. It simply existed. Resting quietly in its proper place. Time moved gently that night. A father in Daegu closed his gate. A sun under foreign stars breathed in the cool air. A woman in Seoul gazed at her reflection with steady eyes. Their lives were no longer intertwined. The threads of memory remained soft, intact. Broken by bitterness. Between yesterday and tomorrow. Between what was and what is. Their stories found a peaceful equilibrium, one shaped by gratitude, growth, and the quiet grace of letting things rest naturally. Lights of the city dimmed and the world eased into night. One truth lingered softly in the air. Memories do not disappear. They simply settle gently in the heart, allowing each person to walk forward with kindness in their steps. The story ends without drama, only with a sense of closure, respect, and the unmistakable tenderness of a Korean-style narrative that honors both the past and the present.